Welcome classic rock fans to a rather strange video looking at a strange form of music. All that electronic bloopery and frilly cuffs and bizarre haircuts that assaulted us on our TV screens in the early 80s. You guessed it, it's the 10 best synth anthems for that decade. So let's do this, shall we? Number 10 is Ghosts by Japan from 1981. This is a remarkable composition blending this minimalistic aesthetic with these haunting synthesized sounds and a melancholic, almost deadpan vocal delivery. I mean, this was the age of the singerless singers, really. Of course, John Lydon thrilled us a few years prior with his anti-singing. But the 80s were defined by these vocal performances that were flat as a flounder that had been sat on. But the 80s were all about texture and strange hair, rather than the showy vocals and bombast of the decade that preceded it. Anyway, that's my defence, I think, my apologia for a video that's very off-topic for me. But I think Ghosts was Japan's biggest hit. The band split up about 8 months after this came out, with one of their members finding his feet in a very influential and contemporary progressive rock band. Although this synth textured music was very popular in the early 80s, it was still unusual to have no kind of rhythm track to it. Although I would argue Tangerine Dream were kind of there before them. Number 9 for me is Enola Gay by OMD. One waggish critic said of this one, with Enola Gay, orchestral manoeuvres drop another devastating warhead on the world of inferior pop music. Even Jonathan Green, writing for the Canberra Times, said it was super with a lovely melody that makes for an utterly infectious song. Interestingly, when OMD, consisting of Andy McCluskey and Paul Humphreys, actually played the song to the Suits, if you will, these guys immediately heard cash tills chiming away, I think. Although, interestingly, by contrast, apparently the band were fairly lukewarm about it. But it has that catchy, heavenly synth line that has us ascending to the troposphere with its cargo of guaranteed fame and notoriety. It was, of course, a lament for the dropping of the bomb on Hiroshima in 1945. Number 8 is Vienna by Ultravox from 1981. Ultravox had been around a few years, kind of a post-punk outfit. I think they rose from the ashes of a band called Tiger Lily. That was before the mustachioed one joined them. But there was ultimately a shift, I think, and they started to pump out these well-crafted, atmospheric synth anthems, one that emphasised the coming of the new wave of electronic pop. The LP Vienna derived most of its momentum from the success of that single, and that sepia-toned video with a very Clark Gable-esque mid-yaw upturned collar and wistful glances to the camera. It means nothing to me, but it obviously meant a lot to a lot of people because the single did very well. No doubt seduced by the enigmatic music and the contemplative croon of Midura himself. I love the pseudo-pomp and neoclassical interlude in this one with the violins, and just a wonderful piece of music. Excellent composition. The video, of course, was inspired by the film The Third Man, which starred Orson Welles, if I'm not mistaken. But nevertheless, it did awfully well for them. It was held at the number 2 spot. It was kept from getting to number 1 by John Lennon's Woman. And that 80s classic, of course, Joe Dolce's Shut Up Your Face. Number 7 is Tears for Fears and Mad World from 1982. This was written on the guitar by Roland Orzabal. Please forgive me if I've said that wrong. He was then only 19 when he wrote this song, living, I think, above a food shop in Bath. He said it was inspired by watching all the people milling around, all the shoppers. In fact, he said it should have been called Bourgeois World. Nevertheless, the melancholic tone of this one lends itself so well to the Donnie Darko soundtrack, albeit a re-recording. The arresting offbeat helps create a sense of discomfort, a sense of unease, in the same way that half-rhyme does in poetry. Another inspiration for this was the work of American psychologist Arthur Janov, whose work on dream therapy inspired the line, "The dreams in which I'm dying are the best I've ever had." Cheery stuff. Number 6 is Eurythmics, and Here Comes the Rain Again from 1983. This is a song that skillfully employs the pathetic fallacy in the sense that it describes the rather gloomy forecast and mood of the writer, skillfully represented in the downpour. Of course, it's a metaphor for depression, I think. Here Comes the Rain Again. It was actually composed by Dave Stewart on the guitar, just watching the rain trickle down the window, when his then lover Annie Lennox spontaneously sang Here Comes the Rain Again. Maybe they were just both big ELO fans. To quote Dave Stewart, the whole song was about the undecided thing like here comes depression or here comes that downward spiral. This is certainly my favourite Eurythmics number. Number 5 is Flock of Seagulls and Wishing I Had a Picture of You from 1983. Man, I love this number. This song exemplifies that synth pop spaced out vibe and yearning for imagined or absent lovers. I love the wall of sound feel that this song has. This styled layer of synthesizers makes the whole thing feel symphonic. AllMusic described it as a multi-layered hypnotic song, and they're not wrong. And Flock of Seagulls beautifully create that sense of longing through the very nonchalant, skillful delivery of Mike's score. Creative lyrics combined with the ebb and flow of the music, very much like the emotions themselves. A very catchy bit of 80s pop that I never tire of listening to. Number 4 is Blue Monday by New Order from 1983. New Order was created from the ashes of the Joy Division, of course. The remaining members, the members of that band always said that if one of them departed, they would cease using that name. So the remaining trio used the new moniker and recruited a new member of the band, Gillian Gilbert, on keys and second guitar. The band's first single, Ceremony, as with their first album after the tragic demise of Ian Curtis, was still very much in that post-punk vibe. It wasn't until the remaining band members took a trip to New York and were influenced by the dance music and electronica of the time, and specifically Italian disco, that the band fundamentally changed direction, and we get this number. It's even said that in this one there's a slight sample of a Kraftwerk number. I love the incessant beat of this one and the pallid, emotionless croon that kind of drapes over it like a pall. Number 2 is Kraftwerk and the Model from 1982. What ranking video on electronica and the knob twiddlers of the 1980s would be complete without mentioning Kraftwerk? Those synth pop pioneers, of course. Kraftwerk's first 2 eponymous LPs were rooted firmly in the experimental krautrock style, or kosmisch music, shall we say. That was popular at the time of their formation, and wonderful examples of electronic ambience and minimalism. And this seminal synth pop sound was encapsulated beautifully with the Model, originally released in 1978, then was re-released in 1981 as the B-side to Computer Love, before being released as an A-side in 1982 and doing bloody well. I think the Model is a near-perfect construct, this unassuming instrumentation platforming the vocals themselves not too rangy, very much in keeping with their style, an instantly memorable melody played in octaves throughout. Wonderful stuff. Number 2 for me is Visage and Fade to Grey from 1981. The trench-coated mustachioed one plays another role in this, as actually Visage were formed by Midge and Rusty Egan in 1978. No doubt after Midge had turned down a place in the Sex Pistols, believe it or not. Fade to Grey was originally called Toot City, but it sounds a bit like my house after Curry Night. It was actually composed by Chris Payne and Billy Curry whilst touring with Gary Newman. Midge, liking what he heard, immediately seized upon it, and he actually recruited Egan's girlfriend Bridget Arians, again I hope I've said that right, to sing some of the lyrics in French, which certainly lends a number that enigmatic, sexy Europop flavour to it, in the same way Nico did for the Velvet Underground, I suspect. Fade to Grey is certainly one of those numbers that looks towards the new romantic future with its Pierrot posturing and heroin chic, with those eerie synth howls like blast across a minimalistic post-Bowie and Eno landscape. A chilling and quite sexy record. I think it's that French bit that does it. And number 1 for me is Gary Newman, Tubeway Army and Our Friends Electric. Yes, I know this was 1979, it was not exactly 80s, but it was certainly looking in that direction, wasn't it? This is the masterpiece from that 1979 concept album Replicas that just oozes atmospheric menace with its throbbing electronica, putting Newman firmly on the map with his futuristic androgyny and pulse. 79 was certainly a good year for him, as I think it was the same year he put out The Pleasure Principle, which was another fine album. That powerful mini-moog riff is just absolutely sublime and certainly defines this number, and certainly aided, I think, Newman's breakthrough in 1979, although Newman later on said, you can't dance to it, it doesn't have a chorus, it's really long and it's about robot prostitutes, which is exactly what we wanted. The mechanical discord and the ebb and flow of the synths create a sense of unease which perfectly suits the dystopian concept of this album, based loosely on the novel Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep. It's a dark novel about human beings being replaced by androids or robots or replicas, as referenced in the Blade Runner movie. So there you go, that's my top 10 synth pop anthems of the 1980s. If I could have a couple of honourable mentions, I'd like to mention Tainted Love by Soft Cell, because Mark Almond was fantastic in that video anyway. And vocally as well, he's a remarkable performer. And another song which you'll mock me for is I was rather keen on Safety Dance by Men Without Hats, but there you are, I would never admit that. Anyway, I'll leave you with my closing salvo, which is, as you know, hope you're well and not doing anything weird like dreaming of electric sheep. Dream of the regular kind like I do. Stay safe and keep listening.